Um, my bipolar, when I was diagnosed, I realised it had been with me my whole life. It wasn't like something that had just arisen. But at the times when I now know it was apparent, it kind of joins up. So when I was a kid at school, I never felt like I fitted anywhere. I kind of felt like the odd one out. And I could never understand why sometimes I'd have energy and enthusiasm, and at other times I'd be completely the opposite. I'd feel anonymous. I'd feel, I would never have articulated it like this, but somebody who didn't have an identity or validity. And of course, my upbringing and the way I was brought up was very much like, oh, come on, pull yourself together, as opposed to, at that time, anybody sitting down and going, what is it? What lies behind this? And then as I progressed, got through later in life, the same things would occur, but often completely irrational, no trigger. So it was like not knowing who was going to wake up the next morning. And that becomes quite scary. And so, again, I put it down to, I'd find excuses as to why I'd been in a bad way. And it was strange in business, because once a business partner I had about maybe 40 designers working for me, and a business partner I had at the time said, can we go out for lunch? And he said, do you realise that there are times you walk into the studio and you enthuse everybody, you put so much energy in. And he said, there are other times you come in and you put a black cloud over the place. And I dismissed it. I said, no, it's nonsense. I wouldn't have it. And then I had my big crash. And that was completely inexplicable. Kind of knew I wasn't happy with my life, but that crash was like taking all of the things that had happened over my life, and they all exploded at the same time. But I still wouldn't go for help. I still thought, come on, pull yourself out of this. You can do it. You can, you're being stupid. And then it got worse, and it kind of culminated. I went to the doctors eventually and said, look, I'm a bit depressed and things, and made light of it, as opposed to sharing the day. He wasn't the kind of character you could really talk to in that way, and I was still being a bit blokey about it all. Anyway, he put me on a drug. He said, this will make you feel better. And within 2 weeks, I was in an even darker hole, massive. And I was working at the time in Soho, and we were 3 stories up. And I decided I didn't want to live. I decided I'd jump out of the window, and I put a chair up against the door so nobody could get in. It was quite funny, really. I couldn't get the window open. It was stuck. But in between the bottom of the window was yellow pages, the old big thick ones. And it was holding the wind. It was our version of air conditioning. Anyway, I managed to get that out, but the window still wouldn't go. And I've no idea why. But I started looking through it for mental health charities. Okay. And I don't know which one it was that I rang. And I got the receptionist on the phone. And I said, I want to kill myself. And he said, but I'm only the receptionist. All the counsellors are out for lunch, right? But he could hear I was in a desperate state, and he started talking to me. And he was a wonderful man who, if I knew who he was, I would give him a massive hug and tell him he actually saved my life. And he asked me about my drugs, and I told him, and he said, did your doctor explain that could make it much worse? And I went, no. He said, well, it happened to me. And he said, I suggest you go back to your doctor. So I went back to the doctor. They put me on something else. And then I changed doctors, and I took various things until finally I went to see the doctor with my wife, and he said, this is much more serious than you're letting on. He said, I can see that just by looking at you. And it was at that point I kind of went, yeah, it is. And so I went to see a psychiatrist who, within the first, well, I was only there 20 minutes now, explained some things. He had no bedside manner, and he kind of said, yes, bipolar, lower end of the scale. It made me very, very lethargic. I struggled to get out of bed in the morning. My muscles ached. And it was like just being in a fog. It took away the ups and downs, but it took away me. And I was on that for 12 years. And that was 12 years of my life when I look back and think, I lost that. I didn't lose all the bad times and good times prior to that because they were life. I lived them. But those 12 years took me away, and I had no idea who I was. And then eventually I went to see another psychiatrist, and she was just amazing. And she said, we're taking you off that stuff and we're putting you on something else. And at first I said no, because I was frightened if I came off that, I'd go right back to who I was before that. Anyway, she gave me this medication. And within 2 weeks, I'd got me back. And me in a much better frame of mind. And that lovely lady changed my life. And it was then that I realised that just because you've been in a horrible, horrible, dark place doesn't mean what you believe at the time, that at the time you think, this is it forever. And that's what can lead you to do something drastic. And I realised that I hadn't disappeared. Mike Skidmore was still there. And Mike Skidmore had a contribution he could make to life. He could be valid. And that was such an emotional effect on me. I became whole again. And that then allowed me to deal with the other side of my issues, which was what I call conventional depression. So the best way I can describe it is when I was at my worst, it was like being in a long, dark alley where I couldn't see anything. I didn't want to go back because it was like there were scary things out there, and I didn't want to go forward because there were scary things waiting for me. And when I got better, the analogy I used is I discovered that I'd always had a torch in my pocket, and in the other pocket I had some batteries. And knowing that is kind of really important, and it absolutely describes where I was then, where I am now. I've got a torch, I've got a battery or batteries, and I actually love going down that alleyway. It's something I so look forward to, not knowing where it's going to lead me. And that's why with my art, I think about that light. I know it's a hackney phrase, light at the end of the tunnel, but my art is about that. It's about the joy of knowing that just up there's something that will make me smile, something that will make me happy to be alive. And that's all I'm interested with my painting. It's about me being happy to be alive, about me smiling, and about just the joy of painting rather than the pain of painting as it used to be. And I am not going to do those kind of pictures again because I don't need to, and because I'm one of the privileged people in the world. I wake up every day really looking forward to my day's work. Who else can say that? Very few of us are that lucky. And so that's my bipolar story, with all of the horrible bits taken out, which nobody needs to hear.
For you, I leave my light on. It's best against the storm. And you came in like the titan. I knew that we could keep each other warm. You bring glucosmia and fuchsias, and I sing your name into the night. A king of salt and stones, your compass, it swings from you to me tonight. We swear